A very good day to you. I'm Howard Feldman, and this is the Sunday Synthesis Podcast with me, Howard Feldman, and of course, Dr. Anton Myberg. It is Sunday, the 12th of September, 2021, and we have your questions covered. Dr. Anton Myberg, you're on call this weekend. How's it going?
It's going. It's a very different call to calls I've experienced over the last few months. The numbers are definitely down. We've currently got 6 COVID patients in the ward. I repeat, that's 6 COVID cases, which is phenomenal. Most of these 6 COVID cases are patients that have been in the ward for at least 1 to 2 weeks. So from that point of view, it's looking pretty good. And please God, we maintain that for a long period of time. We're currently sitting on 224 million cases worldwide, with 4.6 million deaths and 201 million cases resolved. The United States has 41.7 million cases with 677,000 deaths. India, 33.2 million cases with 442,000 deaths. And South Africa has 2,854,234 cases with 84,751 deaths and 5,309 new cases in the last 24 hours, a 10.7% test positivity rate, of which there were only 433 cases in Gauteng. The actual numbers in Gauteng now are sitting at about 4.4%, which is dramatically decreased and goes with the World Health Organization guidelines of having your numbers less than 5%. All provinces in South Africa are now currently over their peaks. The numbers in Gauteng are dramatically down. As I said, in hospital, there's about 2,870 cases, with 549 in ICU and 274 ventilated. And if we look at the stats in a province like Western Cape, they did a study in the middle to end of August, around the 14th to 20th of August, of the people over the age of 60. And they've got a population of about 720,000 people over the age of 60, of which 270,000 people were vaccinated. That's 38%. Of that amount of people, there were 2,455 COVID cases, of which only of them 200 were amongst the vaccinated. So there was only 8% of that 2,455 cases were the vaccinated cases. Of the patients admitted to hospital, there were 729 patients, and only 30 of them were vaccinated. So that's 4%. And of the total deaths, there was 292, of which only 5 were vaccinated, which is a 1.7% rate of death. So there's no doubt about it. The vaccine works. The vaccine is doing dramatic things, and it's showing us that it definitely treats severe and critical disease.
All right. So that is really good news. So if we pass the peak of the third wave now in almost every province, I'm assuming that we should be adjusting our regulations, because really, isn't it now the time that we should be living a little bit more of a normal life? Because it might come a time again that we will have to be a little bit more strict, perhaps.
So yeah, 100% correct. I think we're all waiting for the president to have another family meeting. I'm hoping it's going to be tonight. We're hoping it's going to happen, and he's going to give us some good news and sort of ease the levels of the restriction. I'm actually not sure what level of restriction we're on at the moment. I think we're on level 5 billion at the moment, but we're hoping for him to bring it down to
2.1 version 3.
Yeah, so we're hoping to bring it down to maybe level 0.1, 0.9 or something like that.
Yes,
so
I heard 1.9 is the way to go.
Yeah,
do you think
it's a nice variant? Yeah.
Yeah, although I have to say that I'm enjoying the curfew. The 10 o'clock, I think, is very healthy, and I think we should extend that permanently. Is there any chance we can do that?
So somehow, I don't think that's going to last for very long. So we have to wait and see. But with the current figures and the way things are going, there's no doubt that the restrictions have to be eased. We need to, in some ways, learn how to live with this disease, being safe at the same time, not neglecting the rules, but being able to live a bit more and be able to actually socialize a bit more safely. And as you correctly say, enjoy the time that we can until, unfortunately, the next wave occurs. And we are expecting the next wave to occur either mid to end of November. So, you've got to make hay while the sun shines. That's very true, because the sun is shining. But making hay doesn't mean you've got to fill it with manure. In other words, we've got to make sure we wear our mask and we social distance.
The other thing as well is that we're seeing a lot of anxiety, depression, isolation. These are real impacts of what's going on in the world that we're living in. We are living isolated lives compared to how we used to live it. Surely that's why we need to get people, when we can, back to churches and mosques and synagogues, back to some form of community, connecting with each other, back to the office whilst we can.
100%. We need to reform or remake our reality that we're dealing with, and actually make sure that it's a broader reality and a sort of a broader socialization in a safer environment.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. A couple of questions. The World Health Organization made an announcement last week sometime that they would like there to be almost like a pause on COVID vaccine boosters until 2022, so that the so-called poorer or developing countries can catch up. Can I get your reaction to it?
Sure, that's quite a hectic question, and it's quite a hectic statement. And you've got to look at it from an ethical side. You've got to look at it from a hospitalization side. You've got to look at it from a medical side. There's so many different aspects and different angles to look at that question. If you look at it from my side, you got to understand. You now want to take a whole population and say, hold on, we've done so well in certain areas. We've been able to curtail the spread of the virus, but now we know that you're going to definitively need an extra booster. So we know you're going to need, let's say, 3 Pfizers, but hold back because other people haven't got it, and then give yourself a chance to get another variant or give yourself a mutation, and let you just make sure that other people are covered. And the ethics behind this are dramatic, because we do know that the poorer countries need to be vaccinated, and we want that, but there's lots of vaccine hesitancy. And, I was listening to a talk by Prof. Shabir Mahdi the other day, and he was saying, we've got a surplus of vaccines in this country now. It's not like we don't have vaccine security. We've got vaccine security. So it's not like we have to hold back on vaccinations. But what he's saying, and I think it's a very important concept, is that frontline healthcare workers need to get the boosters. He said he's not talking about the general person on the street. He's not talking about somebody who sits at home and sits in the office and has got maybe one COVID. He's talking about the people who are there to protect the other people and prevent
attacked by that comment, by the way.
Why do you sit at home by yourself?
Maybe I do want boosters. I want to play vaccine bingo. I want to collect the whole card if possible.
Yes, the whole card. Hey, yes. So basically, what he's saying is that you want to get your bingo straight away. Hey. Yeah. So basically, what Shabir Mahdi is saying, and I have to agree with him, is that you need to protect your frontline workers, because we know, and this is from data showing that someone who's had, let's say, the Johnson & Johnson, or someone who's had 2 Pfizers, we know that the Johnson & Johnson is extremely successful in protecting you from critical disease and severe disease. But what we also know is that it doesn't protect you against mild disease or infection. And that's why we're saying you need a booster. And he's gone as far to say, he said everyone who's had a Johnson & Johnson should get a Pfizer booster. And that's coming from Prof. Shabir Mahdi, who's a vaccinologist and an immunologist, and who's really up there with all the criteria. But once again, his warning was, what he was saying was that this is not for the general population. He's talking about the frontline healthcare workers. Eventually, we want everyone to have it, and that's everybody, and everyone was going to need it. And especially people who have got chronic diseases, who are immune suppressed, who have got kidneys failure or on chemotherapy or on things like that, they definitively need it. But we've got to be very careful how it's handed out, because we do want, obviously, the broader community and the broader population to get vaccinated. But that's where government needs to step up and ramp up the vaccinations, start mobile vaccinations, and start getting the vaccines out there, and increase vaccine education and prevent vaccine hesitancy.
Of course, the other aspect is that the healthcare workers were the first to receive it. So they've already, there's already been many months since they have received their first shot. So even more so now that they might be exposed to people with COVID, it seems to be very important.
Right. Well, once again, we know that with the Johnson & Johnson, you get immunity for about 6 to 8 months at least, and maybe even up to 2 to 3 years. but it's still not going to protect you against the mild disease or against getting an infection again, and then you transferring it to other people. And that's the biggest problem. Is if you're treating patients and you are looking after people, you've got to make sure that you can't transfer the disease to other people or reinfect other people.
All right. There was also the announcement, which I thought was quite perplexing, that South Africa is getting involved with vaccine trials for children 6 months older, 6 months and older, and that's using Sinovac. I did offer my daughter up as perhaps,
as a sacrificial lamb. I think we're looking at the wrong festival here. The sacrificial lamb.
She refused. I don't know.
For the Jewish New Year. Yeah.
Right. In my day, we would never have refused our parents' request. Either way, Sinovac for 6 months older.
Sure.
Another questions today because
question.
Why not?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think we got to be very careful how we answer this question. I think the first important question we got to ask back to you is to say does the Sinovac have good efficacy against the Delta variant? We don't know that yet. So what are we actually, testing? I mean, I know they've taken this whole trial and they're going to take 14,000 children throughout the world, of which 2,000 will be tested in South Africa from the age of 6 months to 17. We've got to wait to see what happens. I mean, if you ask me if I'd send my own child to be put on the trial, the answer is no. I would be one of those people who would want to see what the trial shows.
Right. Would you send your neighbor's child?
Get them tested. I'm not saying which neighbor I would send. I happen to like some of my neighbors, actually.
All right, fair enough. I was just wondering out loud.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything new on the MU variant?
So it's interesting that we're only speaking about the mu variant now, because already we're halfway through the Greek alphabet with the mu variant, and it's not a new variant. It may be mu, but it's not new. It's still known as a variant of interest. It's not a variant of concern. And I think that's the important point here. This variant was discovered in Colombia in January. So now we are 8 months down the line already, and it's still a variant of interest. It's not a variant of concern. It still is slightly more resistant to some of the vaccines. We know that. But so far, even though it's been detected in many countries in the world, it hasn't really shown its teeth, and we're hoping that it doesn't.
Okay. My son is here from Israel, and he was absolutely shocked. They've obviously got to get a clear test, a COVID negative test before they go back. And he was absolutely shocked at the price of tests in South Africa. And the question that he asked, and I think it's a very relevant question, is it costs us, I can't remember the price, maybe 650 to 850, somewhere 150 Rand, somewhere around there per test. I think our medical aids will cover 2 tests per year. He says in Israel, if somebody's feeling a little bit fluish, they're feeling anything, they just quickly go get a test, make sure that they're negative, and they carry on, because there's no cost to them having a test. In South Africa, our tests are very, very expensive. Surely, and if you do go to government, they also are quite schnorrer with giving the test. They need to make sure that you really, really warrant it before they give it. Surely we should be turning that on its head and testing everybody and not charging what I think sounds like an incredible amount of money for the tests.
The problem with that is that you'd be in the queue every single day. I mean,
that is so rude. That is so rude.
There's got to be some sort of there's got to be some sort of way to rationalize people getting tested. You can't just go on a whim. So, albeit that I think it's 100% correct what they're doing, that they shouldn't charge for the test during a pandemic, I think there's got to be some rules governing people who do go for tests. So if you're not feeling well, maybe you don't need a test, but it needs to be brought across through a clinic or through some medical practitioner to say this person needs to go for the test, and it's easier for them to go for the test and they don't have to pay for it. I think that's probably the more reasonable way to do it.
Because in that case, then even our positivity rates would be quite different, because you'd be testing more people and you probably will get a better indication. Being so expensive, you're only testing people who have reason to be real reason to be tested.
100%. There's no doubt about that. And the more people you test, obviously you're going to get more positive results. You realize that. But that doesn't mean that they're sicker. It just means that they've got to be in quarantine or isolated. And hopefully you can start decreasing the amount of spread if you put more people in isolation that need to be.
Right. In terms of under 18s and Pfizer, what is the latest? What is the latest in South Africa in that regard?
So I saw SAHPRA put out a statement that they've given the go-ahead for the use of Pfizer, or the use of Pfizer in the over 12-year-olds. Now, that's all good and well, but we've got to wait for the National Health Department and the government to condone the use of that. So I do see it's going to happen, and I still think it's going to happen sooner rather than later, and I definitely hope that it will happen before November, or at least we can get these youngsters vaccinated. And it's important to get them vaccinated because we want to keep them at school. And you may ask why only the above 12-year-olds, so at least the above 12-year-olds are vaccinated, and if their parents are vaccinated, you've already then broken a huge chain of transmission between adults and children, and it's a way to curtail the spread of the virus.
I don't know if you recall that last week, Sunday, I asked you a question about from Richard. And in fact, what had happened was him and his wife had COVID. They then had the vaccine. They went on holiday locally with some friend who had come from Europe who had turned out to be positive. They'd moved out, isolated, etc. We spoke about that. We spoke about that last week. There's a bit of a follow-up on the story. Richard said, I asked you a question last week. My wife and I tested positive 8 weeks ago and had the first Pfizer 2 weeks ago. We were in contact with the corona positive family members on a holiday at a holiday home. An update on the story is my wife and I started to get flu symptoms exactly 6 days after exposure. We are now full-blown sick all over again. Could this be a different variant that caused this? The family came from Europe. Every Google search that I've done says that it's near impossible to be sick again within 3 months, especially with one vaccine under our belts. So crazy.
I think we've got to take the word impossible out of the equation here, because nothing's impossible with corona. We've learned that the hard way, unfortunately. I think what's interesting to note here, and the actual end point of this whole story is the fact is that people have got the misconception that if you've had corona, you've got antibodies that will last for a long time. That much we're not sure about. We believe that the antibodies will protect you for a few weeks post-corona. We're not sure for exactly how long, but this is your case in point, that if you've had corona and you've had it recently, you still are not 100% protected from getting reinfection. And whether or not this is reinfection or delayed infection, it's impossible to say. It's unlikely it was a different variant. I mean, the predominant variant worldwide is Delta. The predominant variant in South Africa is Delta. It's unlikely it was one of the other variants. So it just shows that you still got to be careful whether you've had it recently or not. You've still got to wear masks. You can still transmit it. You can still get the virus and you can still get sick. And it also shows that obviously one vaccine is not good enough to protect you. So don't be under any false illusions that with one vaccination you are protected. That's very important.
That said, it's interesting that one would have thought, having had COVID and at least one of the vaccines, they would be a little bit more protected. Although what he's not saying here how ill they are. Hopefully, it is just almost like a flu, given the fact that they've had both COVID and the
point is that you'd really have to look into it very carefully. You'd have to do what we call a respiratory virus swab to see there's no other viruses, nothing else going on, and see exactly what's actually going on and how ill they are. But once again, you have to be cautious, very cautious.
A question from Johannes. He says, hi, Howard, thanks for the awesome podcast. My question is, I tested positive on the 7th of August. I was admitted with PE and COVID pneumonia on the 15th of August, discharged on the 24th. COVID pneumonia got worse on x-rays, 27th. I was put on prednisone and antibiotics. I still have chest pain, shortness of breath, tired. I've had the J&J vaccine earlier in the year. It says powers that B say we can go for a booster shot. Must I wait 30 days since positive test or 30 days from symptoms?
So it sounds to me that you're quite sick. I mean, it doesn't sound like you were just in a mild case of COVID. Once you've had a pulmonary embolism and you're sick and cortisone and you need oxygen, it sounds like you have serious disease. Yeah, so P is a pulmonary embolism. But generally what we're saying is people who have been very sick with it should wait 3 months, not just 1 month. Should wait 3 months before you get your booster.
All right. So because he was asking, is it 30 days from symptoms or being diagnosed? But you're actually saying it's 3 months if you've been that ill.
You must wait 3 months. Yeah. When you're that ill, you've got to wait a longer period of time.
Okay, Johannes, I hope that answers your question. Is there good news?
So yes, there's good news. As we can see, summer's definitely rearing its beautiful head, and we're all wearing short sleeve shirts. Well, at least the young people are wearing short sleeve shirts and enjoying the summer breeze.
Wow.
The numbers are down across the country. We're expecting the president to give us good news and relax some of the restrictions. Soccer is in full swing, and Liverpool are going upwards and to the top. And the vaccination numbers are increasing dramatically, and that's what we want to see, and that's what we're happy to see. And to quote, move in silence, only speak when it's time to say checkmate. Wishing you all a good week, well over the fast, and be safe.
Thank you, Dr. Anton Myberg. I'm Howard Feldman. This has been the Sunday Synthesis Podcast with me, Howard Feldman, and of course, Dr. Anton Myberg, wishing you all a wonderful week ahead. If you are going to be fasting on later on in the week, please make sure that you are fully prepared for that as well, and that it's safe for you to do so. In the meantime, send us your questions, subscribe below, and God bless.